I've spent much of my life observing the silent wars people carry within their hearts. And one of the most subtle, most insidious of these wars is the addiction to being right. You see, there's a reason why so many of us walk away from conversations not feeling understood, but feeling superior, or worse, misunderstood and alone. There's a reason why, after long debates or painful arguments, we often replay what we said, justifying our words in the silence of our own mind. We're not always seeking connection, we're seeking validation. And I don't say this as a judgment, I say it because I've been there myself. There was a time when I believed that clarity came from debate, from out-arguing the other, from proving a point. But what I failed to see is that truth, real truth, doesn't need a winner. It doesn't beg to be proven. It simply is. And the more I chased the need to be right, the more I distanced myself from what truly mattered: peace, presence, and people. Maybe you've felt it too. The sting of losing someone you love because the argument became more important than the relationship. The silence after a door was slammed, not just in the room, but in your soul. The look in someone's eyes when they stopped listening, not because you were wrong, but because you stopped listening first. Our brains, fascinating as they are, have a flaw. They crave confirmation, not truth. They seek what aligns with our beliefs, not what humbles them. That's why most arguments aren't bridges, they're battles. We enter them armed, not open. And every time we win, we may be losing something far more valuable: trust, understanding, intimacy. I've met men who were right and deeply lonely. Women who had the last word, but no longer had someone to whisper to at night. Parents estranged from their children, not because they failed to love, but because they couldn't stop needing to be right. And when you dig beneath that stubbornness, you'll often find fear, not arrogance. Fear of being dismissed, fear of being unseen, fear of being wrong, because being wrong, for some, feels like being unworthy. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a choice, a sacred choice. Do I value connection, or do I need control? Do I choose presence or performance? There's no peace in always having to prove yourself. There's no love in a relationship where one always has to lose. And there is no wisdom in a mind that never listens, only talks. If you're listening to this right now and something within you aches, good. That ache is not weakness, it's awakening. It's the soul remembering that we weren't made to conquer each other. We were made to understand one another. There's a reason why the deepest spiritual teachers, Christ, the Buddha, even wise poets, rarely shouted their truths. They whispered them. Not because they lacked conviction, but because they knew the soul listens best in silence. And if you want to truly influence another, if you want to be heard not just in their ears, but in their heart, you must abandon the need to dominate. I remember a man who once told me, "Dale, I've read every book on communication, but my wife still doesn't hear me." I asked him a simple question. Do you speak to connect or to correct? He looked at me, startled, and after a long pause, he confessed, I mostly speak to defend. That confession is sacred, because in that moment he realized what many never do. Defending is not the same as relating, and being loud is not the same as being clear. The greatest truths don't come from the mouth. They radiate from the life behind the words. When we become addicted to being right, we forget how to be real. We speak with sharpness instead of softness. We interrupt instead of inquire. We react instead of reflect. And what happens? The people we love feel judged, not joined. They build walls instead of bridges. And we find ourselves, yet again, alone with our righteousness, but devoid of closeness. There is a verse I cherish, one that whispers wisdom in the heat of any argument. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It's from Proverbs, and it holds a timeless key. The tone of our voice often speaks louder than the words themselves. If your truth burns like a flame, let it warm, not scorch. And maybe no one told you this before, but you are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to be wrong. There is no shame in evolution, only in stagnation. In fact, the moment you stop defending yourself is often the moment others start listening to you. Let me tell you something that changed my life. Not every disagreement needs a resolution. Some just need a pause, a breath, a moment of presence. I've sat across tables where silence healed more than 1,000 words ever could. I've watched fathers reconnect with their children, not through long speeches, but through quiet humility, through a soft, I'm sorry, and the grace to listen. We often chase being right because we confuse it with being respected. But I'll tell you a truth that few will admit. The most respected people are not the loudest. They are the calmest, the most grounded, the ones who don't need to prove anything, because their presence says everything. You don't need to win another argument. You need to win back your peace. There's something profoundly sacred about choosing peace over pride. And perhaps the most courageous thing a human being can ever do is to be still when provoked. To look someone in the eye, breathe, and say, not I'm right, but I'm here. That's what your relationships are really asking for. Not your superiority, your sincerity. Not your perfection, your presence. I once walked through a garden with an old friend who had lost his marriage, not to infidelity or dishonor, but to small, daily battles of ego. He told me, Dale, I spent years trying to be the smartest man in the room, and now the room is empty. That confession stayed with me, because I've seen it so often, people pushing away the very love they crave, because somewhere along the way they mistook proving for protecting. But love doesn't thrive in power dynamics. It thrives in mutual surrender, in soft eyes, in patient pauses, in the kind of humility that says, even if I'm right, I will not use truth as a weapon. I'm not asking you to abandon your convictions. No, keep them. They are sacred. but hold them the way you would hold a child's hand, gently, with reverence. Because if your truth costs you love, costs you friendship, costs you your peace, then maybe it was never truth, but pride dressed up in philosophy. You don't need to suppress your voice, but you may need to soften it. You don't need to agree with everyone, but you can still honor their humanity. That's emotional maturity. That's spiritual leadership. And that, my friend, is how transformation begins. Maybe you're wondering, but what if they never understand me? What if I stay soft and they stay cold? And to that I say, your healing is not dependent on their response. You don't choose tenderness because of what it gives you. You choose it because of who it lets you become. Because the truth is, we don't lose people when we let go of arguments. We find ourselves. We recover the parts of us buried beneath years of defensiveness, sarcasm, and self-protection. We rediscover that quiet strength, the one that knows its worth and no longer begs for approval. You are not a courtroom. You are a soul. You don't need to win. You need to walk in truth and let others meet you there if they're ready. And when you stop reacting, when you stop needing to have the final word, something shifts. Not just in your relationships, but in you. You become lighter, calmer, stronger, not because you gave up, but because you rose above. And isn't that what we're all truly longing for? Not just better conversations, but a better self. A self that's rooted, a self that's clear, a self that no longer sacrifices peace for pride. Maybe no one told you this, but it's okay to not respond. It's okay to let someone be right in the moment while you choose to be free. Because peace, my friend, is not passive, it's powerful. It takes far more strength to stay grounded in the storm than to raise your voice and join it. There is a beautiful verse that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Not argue louder, not prove your point. Be still, because stillness is where we reconnect with truth. Stillness is where we remember that not everything needs to be said, and that some things, when said, no longer need to be proven. I remember speaking with a woman who had lost her brother to years of conflict. Not war or violence, but quiet, cold pride. We both thought we were right, she told me, and now he's gone. And I'd give anything to have one more day with him, not to win, but just to laugh again. Let that sink in. You don't want to be the one who looks back with regret, knowing that your silence could have healed, but you chose the sword of ego instead. You don't want to sacrifice years of love for moments of pride. Because when the noise fades, it's the connection we'll miss, not the conclusions, not the victory. And I promise you this, the more you grow, the less you'll need to explain. The more you mature, the less you'll react. And the more you trust that truth defends itself, the freer you'll become. There is a quiet wisdom that speaks without words. You'll feel it in those who listen more than they lecture, who ask more than they accuse, who bless more than they battle. What if I told you that some of your most powerful relationships could be restored, not through an apology, but through a new presence? What if the person you've been clashing with isn't waiting for you to agree, but to soften, to let down your guard, to listen, not with your logic, but with your heart? You don't need to lose yourself to keep the peace, but you do need to lose the illusion that your identity is tied to being right. Who you are is deeper than your opinions. It's grounded in how you love, how you listen, how you show up when the world demands a fight, and you offer faith instead. So let today be a turning point, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've realized what truly matters. Let this be the day you choose calm over chaos, presence over pride, soul over strategy. Because at the end of it all, no one will remember how many debates you won, but they will remember how they felt in your presence. They will remember whether they felt safe, seen, understood. And perhaps the most sacred thing you can offer someone is not your wisdom, but your warmth. There's a quiet revolution waiting to happen in your heart, and it doesn't require a microphone or a platform. It begins in the unseen spaces, at the dinner table, in the car, during the pauses of a hard conversation. It begins when you decide to let go of the need to be the teacher and become the student of your own life instead. Because humility is not weakness, it is wisdom matured by pain. It is confidence that no longer needs noise. And the one who walks in humility walks with heaven itself. I believe with all my soul that you are not broken. You are not too far gone. You are not doomed to repeat the same cycles of conflict, isolation, and regret. No, you are awakening. You are returning. You are remembering what your soul has always known. That love is more important than pride. That connection is more sacred than correction. There is no shame in admitting that you've been reactive, that you've let words fly too fast, that you've fought battles that didn't need to be fought, that you've walked away from conversations with a heavy heart, wondering why you always feel like the villain or the victim. We've all been there, and we've all got the scars to prove it. But maybe those scars are not signs of failure. Maybe they are sacred reminders that you are capable of healing, that you are ready to stop performing and start being, that you are done rehearsing comebacks and finally willing to return home, to peace, to presence, to God. From this day forward, you walk a new path, a path where silence is not punishment, but power, where being wrong is not defeat, but discovery, where you no longer use truth to wound, but to witness, where you speak not to conquer, but to connect. And if you ever forget this, remember what I told myself for years. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to win to be wise. And you don't have to always be right to be deeply, profoundly loved. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to listen. You are allowed to change. And in that surrender, you will find a strength this world cannot counterfeit, a peace no argument can give, a clarity that needs no defense. You are not here to win debates. You are here to walk in truth, to hold others gently, to let love outshine the need to be right. So breathe, begin again, and walk forward with quiet courage. For this, my dear friend, is how you begin to truly live.